Alright everybody, welcome back to another how-to video. With this one we're going to not only log in and use GENI, but we're going to try and allocate some resources to our slice. So without further ado, let me get rid of that. Let's log in. And remember that we're going to select the GENI project office. Oops. And here we are. So this is our familiar interface. If I scroll down, I can see the project, and I see that I have one join request to handle. So let's take care of that first. There we go. Call that handled. So what I'm going to do now is go down to my slice that I have, and we are going to use something called Flack. Now Flack is a web interface that gives us access to GENI resources. So we'll pop this up here, and what should happen is that as you populate this, your credentials via the keys that you've already generated should automatically log you in right over here. So we should see that come up here in a second. And we're waiting, we're waiting. Oh, great. What we should see is the interface load, and it looks like this. Now right now the interface is starting to populate, and so I'll take a minute here just to talk a little bit about what's going on. Remember that the GENI network is a national network. There are resources all over the place, and so there are racks that are set up at different locations, and then there is the login service and everything else. So what's happening right now is that the Flack interface is sending, well, requests are being made of all of the places that are willing to set up resources for me, and all of that information is going to eventually come back to me and populate this interface. And from there I will select my the locations that I'd like to spin up resources. Now, as I've mentioned before, we are going to spend most of our time setting up VMs. And so what I'm going to do is select a particular aggregate and ask that aggregate to set up resources for me. And you can see now the list is beginning to be populated. And as it does, we can see what kinds of resources I can select. So I can actually select hardware, ask for PCs to be set up, or we can select VMs. So let me see. I think I'm in a Cornell mood. So we'll set up a couple of Cornell VMs. So I'm just going to ask for maybe 3 of these to be populated. Okay. So I've got these VMs that are sitting out here, and as you can see, you can move things around a little bit. And we got this funny little black line that pops up here. Well, this is how we connect our virtual machines together. So I'll connect these guys, and I'll connect these guys, and maybe just for fun we'll go, oops, go across here. Alright, I haven't actually done anything. I'm preparing to make a request of this particular aggregate. So we can see that they're color coded, very nice. So I'm about to make this request to Cornell, and what I'm going to do is ask them to set up 3 virtual machines for me. But remember that these virtual machines are not running right now. So when I make this request, the virtual machines are going to start. So if you think about that for a sec, if I was running VirtualBox here on my machine, or if I was running VMware Workstation on my machine, then I would have to start those virtual machines myself, and it takes a little bit of time. Well, what I'm going to do is ask the aggregate to start these up for me. And before I do, I'm going to show you some of the interfaces that you can access before you make your request. So I could, if I wanted to, do some configuration here on the virtual machines. Initially, what you're going to get when you spin up a virtual machine is a base Linux VM. And so there's a couple of properties here that I can modify, and you can take a look at the tutorials on that. We're not going to do that right now. I'll also show you that the GENI or the Flack interface here is sort of a list of horizontal tabs. So as I click on these, I can populate the interface with whatever I feel like seeing. All right, I think that's about enough. Let's go ahead and start this request going, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this request. And are you sure you want to do this? I sure do. Now, by the way, I was while I was trying to get this up and running here, I had a little SSH key problem myself, and so when I went to Flack first, this login over here was red, and so I had to redo my keys and get those straightened out. So if you run into that, it's likely that you either have a firewall problem or that you've got a key problem. So just be aware of that. Now you can see that all of these are spinning, and that means that my requests are underway and that Cornell is going to try to accommodate my request. Now what's interesting also about this is that each one of these VMs is going to have two sets of IP addresses. One is the IP address that you're going to use to manage the VM remotely. So I'm going to talk to those VMs from a particular or using a particular IP address, and then they're also going to have these interfaces here that they use to communicate with each other. So technically, when I look at VM0 will actually have three interfaces that are live, and so will these other ones. Now I'm doing this real time, so you can see that this actually takes a little bit to get running. Yellow is a good sign. That means that something's happening and that they're trying to provision the VMs for me. And when this goes green, things will be ready to go. Now I'll also remind you, while we're waiting for this to start up, that one of the things that I'm going to make use of is Fire SSH. So we'll see that here in a second. Okay, that's how I'm going to actually talk to my virtual machines. And we're still waiting. Now what I'm going to recommend also is that you do your initial tutorials on one aggregate. So you can see that I selected all of these VMs, or I asked for all of these VMs to be created in one place. You can sort of imagine that if I was going to create a VM in Cornell and then another one, say at NYU, doesn't seem like all that big a deal, but remember that these are sitting on different, not only physical locations, but different logical connections. And so there are some different structures that need to be put in place. There's a different level of communication that has to happen when you think about the different IP networks, VLANs, etc., that have to be connected in order for that to occur. Come on, Cornell. There we go, we're green. So this is a good thing. So very good. So these VMs are now provisioned for me. So now if I go to my information tab here, and I look right up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go visit this particular VM. Now what this VM is now asking me for is for the credentials. Now these are the same credentials that you used to log in, and this is where we have to remember our key location. And I'm going to accept this key. Uh-oh. Let's see if I fat finger this. There we go. That looks a little better. Oh, jeez. Awesome. Yeah, let me see if I can figure out where I wrong here. Authentication failed. That's pretty cool. There we go. Sorry, wrong password. Okay. So we'll just do a quick... That's not going to work. So we'll do take a look at our interfaces here, and we can see that I've got several different interfaces here that are part of these VMs. Now each network that you use, if I go back to Flack and take a peek at my networks, each one of these networks is going to have a different IP range. So what I'll do now is, let's visit another one. Take a look here. So these are my management interfaces, and I've got 10.10.3.1 and 10.10.1.1. So I've got the, and look at the mask here. So these are, this is the 10.10.3 network and the 10.10.1 network. And if I go back over to my other VM, there it is. So what I'm going to do from right here is ping my other VM. There we have it. So you can see that this was pinging just my neighbor here on the topology. Whoops. Just my neighbor here on the topology, so I'm just pinging between a couple of my VMs. Well, that'll about do it for running around in the interface here. I hope this helps you with your first foray into GENI. We're going to end this particular video with a very important task that you have to complete when you're all done. We're not going to be doing anything that's terribly long term, so when you're done experimenting with GENI, what you have to do is remove your resources. And so we're going to delete at our use managers. And what this does is send a request to the aggregate that says, hey, listen, I'm done. You can go ahead and recover those resources again and let somebody else use them. Well, this should clear that up, and over at Cornell, these VMs will be shut down and somebody else can use the processing and the memory that I was using. Well, I think that'll about do it, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. But in the meantime, remember, it's networking. You can do this.